Welcome to the Wellness Rebel Show, where you reclaim your health and tap into your body's healing power. I'm your host, Fatima, here to empower you with the knowledge and tools to take charge of your well-being. Whether you want to boost energy, improve mindset, or unlock vitality, this is your go-to source for practical advice and inspiration. It's time to step into your power and live a life of health and freedom. Welcome to the revolution. Welcome back to the Wellness Rebel Show. Today I have Leah Blondin. She's a functional diagnostic practitioner and she specializes in micronutrient balancing. And she helps women in their hormonal journey get to the root cause and make sure everything's balanced. Hi, Leah. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
I'm excited for you to be here. So let's start with your journey. How did you get into, functional medicine? Like, did you go through your own health struggles and all that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I did. I went through my own health struggles and it's been quite the journey. I think it really started when I was very, very young as a child, like pre-puberty, even having a lot of stomach issues, stomach pain, did all of the standard stuff my health insurance recommended, even down to going into a GI specialist. I got a catheter where they insert this blue dye into your system, and it was insane for a child to do, and still nothing's wrong. So I went on a long time of even trying different like psychiatric meds, stuff for anxiety, and just completely numbing out with legal substances and non-legal substances, trying to find some relief. And it wasn't until I got in a car accident when I was in college in San Diego that everything really got worse. So I had a whiplash incident and I couldn't even function anymore. I also think I was living in mold down in San Diego. Of course, every rental has mold out there. And so I went and saw a GI specialist at the Scripps hospital. No help whatsoever. They literally wouldn't even listen to me. And then my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, was like, "Hey, there's this naturopathic clinic. Have you ever heard of a doctor like this? Maybe you could go do a little bit more there." So they did help a little bit. I would still say that realm of doctors is still very much operating under the mainstream paradigm of, you know, trying to treat the symptoms that are coming up. I did get a lot of relief and got on some bioidentical hormones and was starting to come back online physically, mentally, but it wasn't enough. And it was like just enough to make me operate and function again. And it just wasn't enough. Like I knew I wasn't who I was supposed to be. Like there was something missing from my soul and from my optimal health. And that's when I found FDN, or functional diagnostic nutrition. I was like, I just need to learn to run all the labs myself. Like that was my
Yeah.
solution. And I was actually going to school for interior design. So I graduated from that field and abandoned it completely and turned over into the health and wellness space, started to run my own labs. And that's when I really started to realize that all the root causes that these naturopathic doctors were giving me, oh, well, it's a hormone depletion, or it's candida, or, all the different hosts of things that they said was the root cause, wasn't actually the root cause. Those were actually all symptoms of the root cause. And there's multiple different root causes. And essentially, I just learned that it needs to come back to restoring balance, like at a cellular level. And when your cells get balanced, then your tissues get balanced, then your organs get balanced, then your organ systems get balanced, then your whole body is balanced. And it's like this cascade effect from the cells up to feeling optimal and restoring, energy levels. Like my main symptoms were fatigue, like chronic fatigue, to the point where I dropped out of college for like a year because my brain literally wouldn't function. Like I didn't know how to tell my hand to tell my mouse to click the button on the computer. Like it wasn't working anymore. And so I had to take a year off to like fully commit every day to cooking and eating and doing all the little things. It was like a full-time job for a good amount of time. But that's what I had to do in order to get better. I was 21, 22 years old. So I was really young. I felt like I was too young to say, like, this is it. This is my life. I'm supposed to live
Yeah.
with this anxiety and these suicidal thoughts and this chronic fatigue. Like, I can't even operate as a human being anymore. Like, this can't be it. And thankfully, that's continued to lead me down the rabbit holes of different functional lab testing and understanding how the body and the organ systems work. And it's been an ever evolving journey, I guess you could say. But I finally feel like I'm on the other side of it and wake up every day with energy and vigor and excitement and finally feel like myself again. So that's kind of the gist
Yeah.
of it.
That's a beautiful journey though, like finding that healing on your own. What a blessing you found, you met or found functional diagnostic, the FDN. But how did
Mhm.
were you just like researching? Was it someone who mentioned it to you?
Yeah, it was actually my boyfriend at the time was super into podcasts, like before podcasts were cool. And he heard about FDN on a podcast and was like, sent it to me and was like, hey, you should look into this. You should do this. It sounds like exactly what you need. So it was a huge catalyst in directing me towards that realm. And I was kind of health focused at the time, like when we were dating in the beginning, but it was like artificial health. I guess
Mm-hmm.
you could say, like, I was doing a yoga teacher training and was just looking at like the exterior, what health looks like, and
Yeah.
not the science behind what health looks like, because that had never been introduced to me. All these doctors were writing off the science that they had available and the tests they had available. It was just like, well, we don't know. So I just figured that realm was a little like fake, or it just wasn't going to serve my needs until I did the FDN program. And they always talk about how they work at like a subclinical level. So they're not interested in diagnosing. I don't
Mm-hmm.
care what your diagnosis is. That's what I always tell my clients. It's like, it doesn't matter, because I'm not going to type in fibromyalgia and look at the symptoms and then look at like the most popular list of supplements to take for fibromyalgia, because that's not how we work. How do we look at other data to figure out what's causing these symptoms that they have labeled fibromyalgia, but that stuff doesn't matter to me. So it took a long time for me to mentally like get out of that mainstream bubble of looking at how your health is supposed to operate. So yeah, he has been a huge catalyst. He's the one who helped me get off birth control, because he told me that birth control makes you have different pheromone sensing. So actually, when you're dating somebody, you could be dating the wrong person and potentially marry the wrong person. So he's like, I want you off birth control to make sure you actually like me. And I was like, what? Okay. So yeah, he was way ahead of his time back then.
That's
Um,
amazing. I love
yeah.
it. So what test did you initially, so you did the FDN course and all that stuff, learned about the functional lab tests. What test did you use first on yourself to kind of help figure out, you know, dig deeper and get to the root of your health struggles?
So back in the day, one of the biggest ones that we did at the naturopathic clinic was a stool test. So
Okay.
figuring out that I had several types of E. coli infections and stuff that was causing me to be constipated and have this stomach pain, all of that immediately went away when I started to self-treat off of the stool test. So that was a very invaluable test to me in the beginning, especially if you have GI chronic issues.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then now I would say my most favorite and the most important is an intracellular micronutrient panel. Because, like I said, your gut is built upon cells. So if the
Mm-hmm.
cells in the gut aren't healthy, how are we expecting the gut to be healthy? Or if we're trying to detox the gut, well, if the cells cannot detox on their own, which is their job, like that is a job the cells should be doing, if they can't do that, that's when a lot of people I find struggle with the GI detoxing and other forms of detoxing, is because they haven't worked on that base level, which is the cells. And I
Mm-hmm.
struggled. It was hard for me to do the GI detox because my doctor had not done the base level work of balancing my micronutrients before diving into that. So now knowing what I know and learning what I've learned, that's where I personally start. And that is the test that saved my life again. Because even though I'd seen the naturopathic doctor, I had done, 8 years of health work and health rebuilding, I still wasn't optimal. I was actually very suicidal after my second child was born and full of anxiety and depression. And it was a really, really scary time. So, again, I just had to come back to like, okay, what am I missing? What do I know? How do I go a little bit deeper? And again, nobody at FDN, nobody in my realm of mentorship or practitioners that I know had ever said, hey, let's study the cell health. Hey, let's
Yeah.
look at the micronutrients. And I had seen like HTMA around, and I'd seen some, people will talk about different minerals and B vitamins, and they're so important. And that's all true, but how do we make that applicable? And how do I figure out what's wrong with my brain? Because I have severe mental illness at the time, and this isn't right. And everybody, all the doctors and everyone just say, oh, well, you have postpartum depression. Well, yeah, but why?
Yeah.
I just don't
Why?
want to label it and say, okay, that's good enough for me while I'm, like I wasn't even feeling love for my children. I was like, okay, where's my empathy? Where are my feelings? Again, this doesn't feel like me. And that's when I did my first HTMA. And that really opened up a whole realm of interest to me because I had done, I'm not going to mention names, but there's a company that gives it to you for free if you pay the shipping, and then you get to meet with one of their health coaches to go over the results. And the results were, they were reading it off of face value, which I know you run HTMAs. You can't just say copper's low, zinc is low, you need more. And that's what they had done. They said, and I remember looking back at my notes and was like, oh, low copper, you need more copper.
Hmm.
And I was
Yeah.
like, I'm the type that I always am going to double and triple check. I don't trust a lot after what I've gone through, as most people
Yeah.
have gone through the system, and we've trusted and we end up feeling worse. So that's where I was like, okay, I'm going to double check all this stuff that they recommended based off my HTMA and kind of see what comes up. And that started to dive me into the entire realm of copper and copper zinc balance and the mental health ramifications from imbalances in those minerals, metals, and come to find out that HTMA practitioner had completely no idea what they were talking about and had given me, if I had followed their advice, I would have been more suicidal. Like,
Yeah.
it was not wise on their part to give those recommendations. So that's when I just dove into it like a crazy person, was like, I'm going to figure this out. I started to find all this research about how excess copper can actually cause suicidal ideation and a lack of empathy and anxiety and depression and candida issues and all of these things that I had dealt with literally my entire life, like for decades of time, that all these doctors had missed. If only they had done some simple blood work and seen what my levels were. So, I mean, even if you are experiencing those symptoms, that doesn't mean that you have that problem specifically, the copper
Hmm.
toxicity, because again, those are all just symptoms. And there are multiple reasons why someone could be exhibiting those symptoms. So, my thing is always to just test and not
Yeah.
guess. And then to double test. So if someone says, oh, your HTMA is low in copper, you need more copper, take some beef liver, question that. Go double check that. Go get a blood test, extracellular blood, intracellular blood, which is what I do now with clients. I want to look inside the cell, outside of the cell, and 100,000% make sure that you actually have low copper, because I've yet to actually see low copper in all the people that I've worked with. So there's a lot of nuances around mental health and micronutrient balance that I've had to kind of figure out for myself. I think a lot of people were like gatekeeping it, or they just didn't know. And thinking back to that pregnancy of why my second born child was so much worse with anxiety and depression is because I had listened to all of the health influencers on Instagram say beef liver is nature's multivitamin and everybody needs it for pregnancy.
Yeah.
So I had kind of, at that point, I had sold a business. I had like kind of tapped out from working as a health coach, and had abandoned a lot of the principles that I had learned over the years and was just kind of doing whatever. I was kind of just chilling. I wasn't seeing clients, I wasn't working. And so I listened to the recommendation. Sounds great. Yeah, let's do it. And that was a terrible, terrible pregnancy for me. And it was a terrible postpartum for me. And I think it contributes back to the beef liver, which is very high in copper. And that was making all of my problems worse.
Yeah. I think I know. I know you don't. We're not going to name names. Because I also decided to do that. And I'm like, no, this is not right. It's like doing, doing two different tests and then seeing the two different, like recommendations and all that stuff and diving deep into it. And it's like, yeah, this is not true mineral balancing. And it's basically just replacement therapy. And that's why I feel like a lot of people that don't realize that is they feel worse because they're just doing their replacement therapy. And yeah, I love that you mentioned copper because that's the one thing that I really want to talk to you about, that starting with that, like the beef liver. Almost everyone in the like non-toxic groups, crunchy mom groups are so quick to recommend liver when someone asks, like, I'm having hormonal problems or I am low in energy. What can I take? And everyone's just beef liver, beef liver.
Yeah,
And it's like,
the
no.
yeah.
It's like, don't do that. You're going to feel worse. But yeah, definitely test and don't guess what your body needs because everyone is different. And if you think about it, yes, our ancestors ate beef liver, but they were not eating it every single day. If they harvested one cow or whatever, that that liver is kind of like, I feel like they consume it throughout, like, for however long it lasts. It's not like I'm going to take 6 pills every single day or 8,
Right.
whatever, without knowing your copper status.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a whole different world that our ancestors lived in. So saying that because our ancestors did it, we should do it doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. And then you also have to think about, like you said, what is the realm in which they were doing that? They had a tribe of 100 people that it was shared across, and it wasn't daily. And I'm sure it was a completely different, what the cows were eating was different.
Yeah.
And how they weren't exposed to so many different toxins. I'm sure their adrenals were working well and their own liver was functioning well to detox. And that's just not the world that we live in anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you share what common sources of copper exposures we get nowadays in this modern world?
Yeah, so supplements are a big one. It was really, really hard for me to find a prenatal or like a multivitamin that I could recommend for women and for men and for children because a lot of them have high levels of copper. They have very high levels of iodine. So that's a big one. And like beef liver. So
Yeah.
again, this is a relatively new trend that people are taking them in a capsule form. And there's no micronutrient panel on the label, which I think
Yeah.
there needs to be, because what is the micronutrient breakdown? And it's going to be different from cow to cow, from batch to batch. And if people don't know what they're consuming, then they don't know what they're consuming.
Yeah.
And that can cause a lot of problems. So people have to rely on going to Google and saying, okay, what is the micronutrient breakdown of liver? If somebody wanted to understand how much copper, how much iron, iron's another reason why people are taking beef liver, but how much is in there? And that's really important to know. So along with like B12 is really high in that. So that is one of the most common sources is people are just self-poisoning at this point by
Yeah.
taking random influencers' recommendations and applying them to their life without any kind of data on their body. And I always like to say, what you don't measure, you can't manage.
Yeah.
So, how do you know you're even deficient if you've never ran a micronutrient test? Why are you even taking a multi? Why are you taking beef liver if you are guessing that you're anemic or you're guessing that you have copper deficiency because you have gray hair? Like, that is one of the most common things that I hear is, oh, I have gray hair. I need more copper.
Yeah.
Well, all the clients that I've worked with that have gray hair have copper toxicity. So
Right.
actually that's an oxidative stress problem, not a copper deficiency problem. So that's one of them. Another big one is like swimming pools. Copper
Mm.
is used in swimming pool management. Organic produce was one of the ones that I was most surprised by. So copper is actually sprayed as an organic produce or an organic pesticide
Pesticide.
on
Yeah.
produce because it's not technically a poison. So that can be listed as organic. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a big one. Again, that's not disclosed from company to company on what they're using. And so that's a big one. The other one is being passed down maternally during pregnancy and postpartum. So my son, actually, the one that I took the beef liver with and had the terrible postpartum, he was actually born with like a hemangioma on his back, right where his liver is. And now
Mm.
I understand, oh my gosh, I did that to him because in pregnancy, copper rises naturally. Copper doubles in pregnancy to create blood vessels in a baby. So, what did my baby have? In excess of blood vessels, a cluster of blood vessels on his back right over his liver. So, that's my hypothesis. I obviously can't prove it, but I did do a lot of like self supplementation on my children, not as a baby, but they are 6 and 3 now. So I started to kind of like self treat them off of my lab results. And I even had my daughter's blood work ran at 3 years old at a great pediatric clinic. And her blood work, just regular serum blood work, literally just about mimicked my own serum blood work. And I've seen that play out a lot of times with mothers and children. So
Mm-hmm.
I started to give them a little bit more zinc and some B vitamins and like some of the things that I was doing to find balance in my system, because they really exhibited a lot of the symptoms of copper toxicity as well: trouble sleeping, agitation, a lot of like neurological symptoms. Like at one point, I thought my daughter had autism, but she doesn't. She just had some neural inflammation from what I had passed down to her.
Mm-hmm.
So in pregnancy, the copper level is supposed to drop after you give birth. And a lot of times it doesn't, which can lead to like the postpartum anxiety and depression and rage and lack of empathy towards your baby, is because it sticks around inside the liver and inside of the brain. So that maternal accumulation is one way that children can get it passed down, which I think my own mother passed it down. She had a lot of the same depression, anxiety symptoms as me. And it started to come out during puberty. So at puberty is when your estrogen starts to rise, and estrogen has a very intricate relationship with copper. So that is one of the most common things I see on the Facebook groups and in different clients that I talk to. They're like, well, my daughter started having these symptoms at like 13,
Mm-hmm.
14, right around when she got her period. And that always signals to me, okay, we need to check copper, we need to check zinc, we need to check ceruloplasmin, we need to really understand what's going on, because her estrogen dominance
Yeah.
might not actually be estrogen dominance and just a micronutrient imbalance that is making it look like there's a hormonal problem. And we don't want to artificially lower hormones or artificially raise other hormones if there's not an actual deficiency. So that's a problem in all ages that I think
Yeah.
people are messing with hormones before looking at why the hormones are the way they are.
Definitely.
So
Like, hey, I have estrogen dominance. Wild yam cream.
yeah, right.
It's like,
Yeah, which again can be useful for symptom management, but do you want to do that
yeah,
forever? Is that
forever.
actually
Yeah.
fixing the problem? Or do you want to actually understand the nature of you and your chemistry? And I think that's so much more fun to fully understand yourself and know that it's
Right.
not you. You're not broken. It's that
Yeah.
you've been swimming in these swimming pools and that your mom had this problem and passed it down to you. Or, the other big thing that I'm seeing is like all the copper water bottles and the copper
Mm-hmm.
pitchers, use copper
Yeah.
pan. Same with like the cast iron. It's like, is that iron even usable to your body? Because heme iron in meat is going to be different than what you're going to get in a cast iron pan to fix your iron problem. So
Yeah.
again, all these different artificial sources, copper plumbing. I grew up in a house with copper plumbing. So there's so many different things that can accumulate copper into the body, and then they come out as symptoms when those different hormonal fluctuations, like when estrogen rises during pregnancy and puberty and through the later half of a woman's cycle, causing PMDD and PMS symptoms, those types of things.
Yeah. I actually had a friend who has copper plumbing in their house, and she had really, really, on her HCMA, her copper was like off the charts
Mm,
despite being a slow oxidizer. But I'm
mm,
like, it's your copper pipes, because even though you're not drinking your water, you're bathing in
mhm,
it and,
mhm.
like all these things. And
Yeah,
I think they've lived in that house for so long too.
yeah.
So yeah, copper, man. It's like you need it, but not too
Mm.
much.
Yeah, well, I think we need to remember that it is a metal. It
Yeah,
is a
yeah,
heavy metal, and we
exactly.
only need it in teeny tiny small amounts, and most of that you can get from foods like mushrooms and avocados and dark chocolate. Like, most people are
Yeah,
eating a good amount of dark chocolate in the realm of health people we talk to, I'm sure, and it's like you can get plenty from that,
yeah,
um, without needing a mega dose, so, yeah.
yeah. I know. It's there's too much noise in the internet, and a
Mhm.
lot of people are just trying to find relief from their symptoms and whatnot, and then they follow an influencer, and
Mhm.
yeah, it's like we also need to have that I forget the term. Like, we need to be able to just, like filter through the noise and see what's
Mhm.
right for you. But yeah,
Mhm.
testing definitely. So if you do HCMA, and then you mentioned you do the blood work, intracellular and extracellular, you said, right? And then you
Mhm.
do the serial. So it's like a whole kind of like doing the whole thing, which is great.
Right. Yeah.
Now, when you do that, do you usually find that you don't need, well, obviously, unless someone's having really chronic GI issues, like you said, then you do a stool test with that, right?
Yeah. So my main package that I work with people on is 6 different functional labs together, because I find, me personally, and almost every single person that I've worked with has just picked and choose functional
Mm-hmm.
labs from, okay, 2 years ago I did the Dutch test with this person, and then 3 years ago I did the GI map with this person over here, and then last year I did functional blood work with this person, and it's like, oh, no wonder you are so confused and, feel like most people don't want to do any more functional labs because they've done them here
Yeah,
and there and there. And I totally get it. And I don't want to piecemeal it all together, especially from different times on your timeline. Like, we
yeah,
need to look at what all of these things are doing right now, because
right now.
things change and they can change very quickly, especially with supplementation. For like the adrenals, for instance, everyone's like, oh, do these adrenal cocktails like every day for ever and ever and ever and ever, and or take this supplement, and you could take beef liver long term and it's fine, it's a multivitamin. So, like, people aren't understanding that supplements are supposed to supplement and not be a long-term solution, because if you're on a certain adrenal supplement to lower your cortisol, at some point your cortisol is going to be very low, and now you're going to have to raise it
Yeah,
again. And we
yeah,
just go back and forth of, well, I think it's high because of these symptoms, oh, I think it's low now because of these symptoms, and it can change, and that's why we need to have the data on our bodies to see what's going on and not follow the symptoms, because symptoms are far removed from what the actual problem is. And then we need to really step back from supplementing all the time. Like,
yeah.
I tell my clients, do not take anything I'm recommending for more than 6 months. A lot of
Yep.
stuff, not more than 3 months, because if you're taking omegas every single day, it's going to thin your blood too much. But if you have blood clots, maybe you need that. So there's like time and place and using discernment. Like, I really try to get my clients to tap into, what are you feeling? How do you
Mm-hmm.
feel? What is your intuition saying about taking this? Because your body, most of them always know. And the
Yeah.
data, the functional labs are just confirming what they already know. And they're like, oh, yeah, I knew that. And so that makes it easy for them long term, because we're not going to work together forever and ever and ever and ever. But they can come back and say, okay, I remember when I was feeling that way. And this is what Leah said. And she taught me how to trust my intuition a little bit more. So I'm not going to take the vitamin D year round or the selenium year round because I know I don't need it year round. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
one bottle of selenium in the winter is enough to kind of keep you going for the year if you've struggled with deficiencies in the past or whatever the example is. But it needs to be catered to them and catered to their season of life for what's going on at that point in time.
Yeah. It's very bio individualized.
Yes, one of my favorite
So,
words.
and how do you teach? Because, you know, nowadays a lot of us are so disconnected from our intuition. Like we've almost given that power away to either a man in the white coat or an influencer that you've followed, like you're a like crazy fan over or whatever. How do you help them get back in touch with that intuition?
I always like to have them journal through their process of working with me and understanding what changes they're seeing. Because a lot of times things will start to change in smaller, minuscule amounts that we don't really recognize as progress. Like,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, this morning, someone was like, my heels don't crack anymore. I don't have to scrub them in the shower anymore. And I'm like, that's a little win, but it's also a big win because think about what was going on inside your body when your heels were cracking. And now the exterior, if the exterior is getting better, the interior is getting better too.
Yeah.
Um, so journaling, I think, helps to really connect with how you're feeling. I also like at home data management. So again, what you don't measure, you can't manage. So every once in a while, throw on a CGM, understand what your blood sugar is doing, understand how your meals are supporting you. So that's a big one is blood sugar and teaching them how to understand if those meals worked for them or not because
Mhm.
food is foundational. We're going to eat and drink water for the rest of our lives. And I can't be there on your back, whispering in your ear to get more protein or to have less starchy carbs or, those types of things. Just helping them get it down on paper, the data that they're experiencing. Are you fatigued after your meals? Are you hungry an hour later? They've known for a long time that they're hungry an hour later after their meals and they still haven't made a change. So now if they can put those connections together and be like, oh, a year later, I'm now hungry after my meals. Oh, that's because I've been eating way too much rice or too many potatoes or whatever it is for them. But looking at CGMs, looking at data like your Aura ring, understanding how you're sleeping, how your heart rate is operating, really tracking your cycles, and like using a non-hormonal birth control so you understand what your cervical mucus is doing. So using all of those things for people to tap into what's showing up externally in their body so they can internally process it and think back to what they've learned from working together and say, okay, I know how to make a change because Leah's taught me the principles of health. And if they can't figure it out, they know that they can come back to me and be like, I think my hormones, I've had two more babies since I last talked to you. I think I need another Dutch test. Or I do always recommend doing a micronutrient panel at least once a year. So that's a really good maintenance way. And I find that most issues keep at bay when your micronutrients are imbalanced because they build your hormones, they support your gut lining, they are involved on so many different, every single level in the body that when we address that, there's really not a whole lot of issues come up unless there's something like a car accident or something that's an external stressor. But the internal stressors stay pretty balanced when you keep up with the
Yeah.
foundational work.
Yeah. Definitely minerals, micronutrients. It's like I feel like it's the foundation, like the main foundation. You can do
Yeah.
all the parasite cleanses you want and all the GI or gut healing, like
Mhm.
probiotics, bone broth, and all that stuff. But if you're not dealing with the micronutrients, it's like you're going to be going in circles, right?
Yeah.
So, what does copper detoxification, well, excess copper detox look like?
That honestly varies from person to person. So because I get the hair data and the blood data, I've really seen every combination of copper imbalance out there. So a lot of people will have high copper inside of their cell and lower levels in the serum, so
Mhm.
outside of the cell. Some people have low levels inside the cell, but high levels outside of the cell. So it really comes back to those factors, like, do you actually have too much, or are we just having, do you have enough and it's just having trouble getting into the cell to do its job? So I don't have like a written copper protocol that I just give to everybody, because everyone has a different combination of deficiencies and a different level of deficiencies. So some people, like for instance, myself, I had elevated pyrols, and pyrols are like a byproduct of the metabolic processes that actually waste zinc and B6 in the urine. So you just pee them out. So people with a pyrrole disorder, some are inherited and some are just from external stressors, which is what mine was. I was like up to 50 milligrams of zinc and was so happy, like so good, which is a very high dose for most people. Not something I would recommend. And I think that's kind of what COVID did, is
Yeah.
these standard COVID protocols. You need vitamin D, you need high levels of zinc. And now that everybody's swung the other way on the pendulum, and was like, well, now I'm copper deficient, so I need all this beef liver. And now we're taking all this beef liver, and now everyone's zinc deficient. And it's just like, everyone just wants to teeter totter back and forth. And again, if we just had the data on our own bodies, we wouldn't have to teeter totter back and forth and
Yeah.
spend all this money on supplements, really. Uh, so many people are just wasting money. And that's another thing that I always hear is, well, the labs are so expensive, I don't have money to get the labs. And I would say, well, then you don't have the money to go buy the supplements.
Yeah.
Stop supplementing. If you don't have $200 to go get some good functional blood work, don't be buying $50 of supplements here and $100 of supplements here. Like, save that money so you can get some data on yourself, because that's much
Yeah.
more valuable than the random supplements and the ads on Instagram.
Yep.
Uh, and a lot of people who I don't even work with, I've just said, hey, stop taking all the supplements. And they come back 3 weeks later and they're like, all my anxiety's gone. And I'm like, cool. Or I see a lot of people doing like the probiotics and kefir and kombucha, and they're like, we
Mhm.
need more gut bacteria. Well, if you have too much gut bacteria, you're going to be bloated and you're going to have all these other problems that you're coming to me for. And then 3 weeks later, they're like, all my bloating's gone. I'm like, yeah, because you were making kefir in your closet. Let's not do that.
Right? It's like
So,
sometimes subtraction is actually needed than addition.
yeah, and that's such a good, that should be a theme for everybody this year, is where do I need less? Maybe I'm getting
Yeah.
too much. And like I said before, I think a lot of people are self-poisoning themselves with just stuff that they read
Yeah.
about, and it's a waste. So yeah, back to like a protocol, it really depends on what's really exhibiting in people and what they're, so I calculate what we call your free copper percentage. And I think most people, most doctors and health practitioners will look at your copper to zinc ratio, which is just looking at copper and zinc and the ratio between the two, which is an important marker to look at. But you also need to look at your free copper percentage. And that is a very specific math formula, which I am not good at math. So I use a program. I plug in the numbers and it self-calculates for me. And that is looking at the copper and ceruloplasmin levels, and essentially how much copper is free floating in the
Mhm.
serum. So copper needs to be transported by ceruloplasmin to get where it needs to go do its job. And if there's not enough ceruloplasmin, I think of it like a school bus. Like,
Yeah.
the school bus has got to pick up copper and it's got to take it to its job. But if there's not enough school buses and copper's just hitchhiking on the road, your body says, hey, there's this heavy metal in my blood, and it's going to self-regulate as fast as it can. And it's going to first send it into the liver and cause a host of liver problems for people. And then secondarily, it's going to move it up into the brain, which is what I think I had overloaded my liver. And I was full on suicide, anxiety, depression, rage, up at 3 a.m, acting like a crazy person because it was accumulating in my brain. So with copper, because it is a metal, it can be very damaging. It can cause a lot of oxidative stress. And you don't want to just be like, I'm going to chelate today and like try to get rid of it as fast as possible, because you're going to feel worse before you ever feel better. So for me, I've been on a journey of detoxing excess copper for at least 2 years now. So with copper and with any kind of heavy metal, going slowly is the key. So that comes with, again, balancing all of your micronutrients. Are you getting enough zinc? Do you have a pyrrole disorder? Are you getting enough vitamin C and manganese and like amino acids? Like nobody ever talks about amino acids, and amino acids are like one of the most important things for copper detoxification and cell health. So that's one of the things that's tested on my micronutrient panel, is a handful of amino acids and how they're utilizing getting into the cell. So again, there's so much nuance when it comes to detoxing anything in particular, and really working on what people can do now is just working on the foundations. So are you sweating? Are you pooping well? If you're constipated, get yourself pooping, because the copper is just going to recirculate in the system and it's going to go somewhere. So a lot of times I see people gain a lot of weight when they're on beef liver supplements, because it's a heavy metal. It needs to go be stored somewhere. And if your brain is overloaded and your liver's overloaded, it's just going to accumulate into the fat tissue. So again, we don't want to go on this rapid weight loss journey, because it's all going to just push out into the system, and it could damage your kidneys. It can damage your gut. It can damage your liver and your brain. So slowly but surely is really the way, and using a customized approach based off what your lab data is showing is key. Or else you might feel sicker before you get better. And having the mentality of it being a longer term process, it's not some overnight thing that you can fix, especially when you think about how long most people suffer. Like if this is passed down to you maternally and you've had this issue since you were a kid, that's a long time for this problem to unfold in your body. And it might take a long time for it to reverse safely to a level of homeostasis.
Yeah, there's definitely no shortcuts. Now, speaking of trying to get rid of copper, excess, or other heavy metals, I don't like it, but do you like all these zeolite sprays that's getting highly recommended by everybody?
Do I like them?
Yeah. Or do you?
It really depends on the person again. So I personally had great success with the zeolite sprays. But I have seen, if you're not pooping, if you're not sweating, if your bile isn't flowing, it's all going to recirculate and reaccumulate, and you're going to feel worse. So I think that's where the controversy came out, is like, oh, it's making my kid sicker. Well, if your kid hasn't pooped in 5 days, like you're working on the wrong things at the wrong time. But for somebody who has worked on drainage and their kidneys are okay and their bile is flowing, because bile is what's going to pick up and transport copper or any heavy metal, any kind of poison in the body or bacterial infection, it's going to pick it up and it's going to move it through the digestive system so you can poop it out. But if you can't poop it out, it's just going to go back up into a different fatty organ and cause a lot of issues. So, and again, I don't think any supplement should be taken long term every single day forever and ever and ever and ever. So with anything and everything, there is a time and place. Some people I think can do really well on those zeolite sprays. Some people I would not recommend being on those zeolite sprays, and maybe they need something that is gentler for the season of life that they're in.
Yeah. I know you say it's like different for everyone, but do you have one specific binder that's kind of like your go-to binder?
I don't. There's a few that I will rotate through. Even like some of the like Cellcore is supposed to be super gentle. Their biotoxin binders super gentle, but there's people who react very poorly to that. Because of like the broccoli, I've seen the broccoli seed extract. causes a lot of digestive issues for people. So it really depends what you're trying to bind,
Yeah.
and the stage of life that you're in. But I use cell course products a lot of time. I use like the Biocidin line, the GI Detox binder quite frequently. Ultra binder has a couple that are good that kind of compromise different metals and mold. So again, it just really should what shows up on your labs. What do we need to bind? How long do we need to bind for? What are your current symptoms that you're experiencing? So there's a whole host of different things, but a lot of times rotating through them is also a frequent practice of mine as well.
Okay. Do you think that there's a relationship between someone who has like copper toxicity and someone's mold sensitivity?
I think so. I think they can both coexist. I wouldn't say there's a hard and fast rule on them going together, but I know for myself that really exacerbated my symptoms and
Mhm.
made it all a lot worse. So no matter what the poison is, whether it's mold or metals or, you know, chemicals in the air, like it's all going to bioaccumulate in the
Yeah.
body. And again, working on the foundations of drainage pathways and micronutrients is really the most important thing, because we don't want to just start to detox mold when it's going to go back up and recirculate in the body, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. How are copper and hormones related?
Well, like I said, all micronutrients are going to make up your hormones. So you need enough zinc to make progesterone and testosterone. And if you are dealing with copper toxicity, that can lower your zinc levels, which is another really big reason why we're seeing estrogen dominance all over the place and low progesterone, is because of this issue. So, copper specifically has a relationship with estrogen, where it can raise estrogen and retain estrogen, and vice versa. So, it can raise estrogen, can raise copper and retain copper. And it's like this vicious cycle that keeps going around. So, a lot of time I hear all the time how people will start getting worse cramping, more PMS symptoms when they're on something like beef liver, even though it was supposed to be to balance their hormones. All the hormone experts recommend it, but a lot of PMS symptoms and cramping will get worse. Things like fibroids, copper can make fibroids grow, which again, we want to say, oh, it's a hormone problem, but well, what's influencing these hormones?
Yeah.
Could there be a metal that is influencing them and then lowering other micronutrients like zinc that would balance that out? And I think of cancer as well, because like the number one cancer, the Hope for Cancer Center in Mexico, they just came out with an email talking about how the estrogen based cancers are one of the most prevalent that they're seeing in the cancer realm right now. And I've personally worked with 3 different people this past year who had cancer. One had uterine cancer, skin cancer, and prostate cancer. Every single one of them had high levels of free copper. So
Mhm.
copper floating around in the body. And
Yeah.
there's tons of studies out there how copper can grow tumors. It is like a growth factor, so it can grow tumors. It's very frequently I see it with fibroid growth. So a lot of times we just want to say, oh, well, it's just an estrogen problem. But again, we need to just figure out, why are you having an estrogen problem,
Yeah.
and look at that micronutrient balance. So copper just influences estrogen. It influences estrogen receptors as well. So on paper, it looks like there's a hormone problem, um, but it can contribute to a whole host of different hormonal symptoms that people can experience. Um, and like I said, it's really common to see these like mental health issues and like weight gain and stuff around those times when hormones are changing, like in puberty. Um,
Yeah.
and that's because of that relationship with estrogen and with copper rising and letting it retain. And then the more that happens, the more liver damage is done, the more adrenal damage is done. And it's just like this vicious cycle that continues on until it's addressed with a balancing of the other micronutrients that are necessary to bring that copper back down to a safe level of operation.
Yeah. How about endometriosis? It seems like more and more women are, experiencing endometriosis. Is
Yeah.
that also that's copper related also,
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
It
it
could
can
be.
be. I don't ever
Yeah.
wanna put something into a
Yeah.
box and say 100% that's the
Yeah.
thing. But if that was me, I would totally go get my copper, my zinc, my ceruloplasmin checked because again, if we think about tissue growth, it grows tumors, it grows fibroids. Could it also possibly growing the endometrial lining to unsafe levels? So that's definitely something that I would consider.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you see a lot, like, oh, surgery. My doctor recommended surgery to remove the growth. And then it's like, it probably will come back if you're not dealing with the real reason
Right.
why it's
Yeah.
happening, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Why is copper status important to know during preconception and pregnancy?
So, for reasons I already said, like making sure you don't pass down an imbalance to your own child. So, we pass down micronutrient imbalances, we pass down infections, like we take a carbon copy and we make it into the
Yeah.
baby. So, obviously, optimizing all aspects of your health before getting pregnant is very, very important. So, your baby has an optimal chance at living a healthy life, obviously. I think we've all heard that statistic of like there's up to 200 chemicals found in the umbilical cord blood. And I think that's a very mild statement. I
Yeah.
think there's probably a lot more if they were looking at things like copper. I doubt. I think that was just looking at like different plasticizers and environmental toxins, but there are other things that we need to look at when it comes to the health of our baby. And then it's also really important to make sure that we don't deal with mental health imbalances like I did. So I want women to birth their baby and feel like they're so excited and they love their baby and they want to be with their baby and, are happy. Like that should be the happiest time in your life, one of them. And if you're going to birth your baby and you're going to be like, I don't want to hold it. I don't want to deal with it. I feel like I shouldn't be living anymore. Like those are it sounds extreme, but it's really common and it's something that's not spoken about because who's going to admit that? Like
Yeah.
that's a hard thing to admit to say that I'm struggling mentally and that I don't feel love for my child. Like I remember vocalizing that to my husband. I'm like, I don't feel like I love you guys. Like something is wrong. I know I do, but where is it? And that's because it shuts down your empathy. And so I don't know what women wouldn't want to feel like they love their child and have a really great postpartum period because it's hard regardless of mental health problems or micronutrient imbalances. So I think that's one of the biggest times in your life to prioritize the micronutrient balancing so you don't have to run into problems later. So it's
Yeah.
either you're going to deal with those things now and you're going to spend a little bit of money to deal with those things now, or you're going to end up spending a lot more money and energy and precious resources when you have an infant child and probably other children as well. How are you going to take care of them? If you can't take care of yourself, how are you going to take care of them? And the copper is one topic, making sure you don't have too much so you're not passing it down to them because it is associated with things like autism and ADHD. The Weston A. Price Foundation, ironically, who promotes all the beef liver, has a great article. I've linked it in my highlights, in my copper highlights on my Instagram page. Their article talking about excess copper causing autism. And it's like, hello, ding ding ding, like there's so many things like, and I don't know any mom who wouldn't want the best for their child. So
Yeah.
with some simple blood work, more comprehensive than any midwife or doctor is doing, you need to ask for a lot more and then do the intracellular testing is really important as well. But it's just going to give you so many benefits long term so you don't have to deal with issues after the baby's born.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I think that's all the time we have, but I always ask my guests if they have like a favorite mantra or a golden nugget that they want to share, to inspire anyone on a health journey, or, like whatever golden nugget you have for
Okay.
anyone who's on a health journey.
Well, my favorite saying I've said 3 times already is what you don't measure, you can't manage. So, if you are looking to manage your health, but you're not committed to spending money on blood work or getting some extra labs or paying for somebody to walk you through the process, if you're not an expert yourself, then you're missing the mark. And I would say, hey, cut back on buying all these cool supplements and all these cool gadgets and, all these biohacking tools. Like, they're great, but they're not going to fix what's really important, which is your cell health. So, whether that's getting the blood work and getting some functional labs, or maybe it's just managing your sleep, getting an Aura ring, getting a continuous glucose monitor, getting something that can give you some data on your body so you can make small incremental changes. Like, that's where we see health multiplied, is doing the small, consistent, daily little things. Those are what are going to add up to long-term health for the rest of your life.
I love that. Yeah, I've heard this saying too. It's like small hinges moves big doors. So don't
Mhm.
ever feel discouraged if you can't do all the big things all at once. Just
Right.
taking that first small step is what's
Mhm.
important, right? Like, get your journey going,
Yeah.
get your toes wet. But yeah, don't get distracted by all the new supplements and all
Yeah.
the biohacking tools. Hey,
Yeah.
the biohacking tools are nice to have, but they're not a need to have,
Right.
right? They're a want. They're a
For sure.
luxury, and not knowing what your body really needs will not make you move the needle just using the biohacking tools.
Right.
I feel
Yeah,
like
it's not
there's going to be
as
like temporary fixes, right? If you're not
yeah.
doing you're not nourishing yourself.
Mhm. Yeah,
Well,
100%. It's the most
well,
important.
thank you so much, Leah, for being on here.
Yeah,
Before you
thank you.
go, one more time, I forgot. Can you remind the listeners where they can find you if they want to get in touch with you? And of course, everything will be in the show notes, but go ahead and let us know.
Okay. So my website, my Instagram, my YouTube, all of the things are the same. It is at lifelabwellnessco.com or at lifelab wellness co on Instagram, on YouTube, on Facebook, all the same thing, spelled the same.
I love that. Makes it way easier, right?
Yeah, I try.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And
Yeah, thank
until
you.
next time,
Okay. Bye.
bye. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please click the subscribe button, share it with others, post about it in social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me or suggest topics, you can follow me on Instagram at Fatima Pagtakan or at The Wellness Rebel Show. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.